Today I want to share with you how I make bokashi, or how I ferment my kitchen waste before I feed it to the worm bins. So this is essentially, you can buy a bokashi bucket online. It probably goes from anything from $25 to $50 for a fancy system. But I figure a way to do it with $3 buckets. So essentially you need two buckets. One of the buckets, you drill holes in the bottom for the fluids to drain, and the other one you don't. The other one you just keep it intact. And then the idea is that because especially these Home Depot buckets, they just case one inside of the other, and they don't go all the way down. There is 2 to 3 inches in the bottom for the retention of those fluids. So that's essentially the system. You essentially use two buckets. The bucket inside have holes in the bottom, and then you add the food scraps, and then you add bokashi. So I'm going to show you how to do that. Hello fellow YouTubers, today I'm going to share with you how I made bokashi. So bokashi essentially is a culture. I buy a bag of, I believe this is like wheat brand with inoculated with bokashi culture. And I buy about a 5-6 pound bag from the Bokashi brothers. I picked up this on Amazon, and it lasts me for about 2 to 3 years. So it goes a long way. It's about $30, I believe. So then the other things, you can buy a Bokashi bucket online and pay $30, $40. But those buckets are usually very limited in terms of how much food you can compress in there. So you probably need multiple buckets, and that can get pricey. I use essentially 2 5-gallon buckets. What you see here is one of the buckets. I drill holes in the bottom for the fluids to drain, and then I put that inside of a bucket that doesn't have any holes. And because the way they case into each other, there is about 2 to 3 inches in the bottom that allow you a space for the fluid to essentially to collect the fluid. You do need to empty the bottom bucket periodically. I would say usually what I do is I start filling the bucket in the kitchen, and once it is full and ready to go, I empty the bottom fluids, whatever is there. I usually just empty it in the toilet or throw it on a compost pile, whatever is available. And then I do that at the end. Once it's done cooking, I empty it. So I essentially empty the bottom bucket right before, once it's filled to the brim, and I'm going to compress it and just let it sit for 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And then at the very end, after 2 or 3 weeks, I also empty the bottom bucket so there is no foul smells or anything. And it's usually just very rich. Some people use that fluid for the gardens as a tea. I usually just dump it on a compost pile outdoors in my garden, or dump it in the toilet if we're in the middle of winter. But you can definitely use that. All right, so you have your 2 buckets, and then the next thing is you're going to add food scraps. What I try to do, I usually cover the bottom with cardboard or some sort of brown paper, just to prevent air circulation coming from the bottom through those little holes. Because unlike the worm bins, where you want the worms to have access to air circulation, that's the reason why I pile a lot of leaves. In the Bokashi system, you want this system to be anaerobic. Essentially, you want this as airtight as possible so there is no air circulation. So the fermentation process is essentially an anaerobic process, so in the absence of oxygen. If you let oxygen in, you're more likely to get foul smells and the like. But yeah, that's how it works. You just start piling your food scraps, and you add a little bokashi as you go. So this is the bucket. You see the little holes in the bottom. Don't go crazy. Don't put holes on the side. Again, you want this to be as tight as possible. So like I said, I usually put some pieces of cardboard or a paper bag on the bottom to try to minimize the airflow. And then I put some of the culture bokashi. This is again what the bag looks like. It says Bokashi Brothers. And I start piling food scraps here. So here I was collecting the food scraps on a different bucket. But essentially just to show you how I do it. So you put a layer of food scraps, and then you put some bokashi, another layer, food scraps. You can compress it very tight. Again, you want to get rid of air as much as possible. And you can keep this bucket in your kitchen, and as you add food, you add a little bit of bokashi mix. And then on top, what I do is more brown paper or cardboard, and just to keep it tight. And sometimes I put a brick and keep a brick there, or a old plate, like a dish plate. You can keep it tight. And then once it's really full to the brim, you want this. I even step on this. I just climb on top and step on it to keep it really tight, and try to get rid of as much air as possible. And once it's filled to the brim, you put the lid. I keep the lid on in the kitchen just to keep bugs and flies out. And then that's your Bokashi system. A few considerations. If I had access to an outdoor composting system all year long, I would not do Bokashi. There's no need for it. Personally, I don't think there is a need for it. The reason why I do it is because I am feeding an indoor composting bin with active red wigglers. I am feeding them the food scraps. So I like the food scraps to be already halfway cooked. I like a lot of the excess fluid to have drained through the bokashi, through the fermentation process. And I also add a ton of eggshells at the end once I'm adding it to the worm bins, to make sure that if it's too acidic, the result of the fermentation process, if it's too acidic, that is not gonna disturb the worms. So far, usually I put the food scraps in the worm bins, big chunks of it, and usually within 3 days, the worms have fully gone on into it. So they really like it. Again, I put a ton of eggshells to neutralize some of the acidity and for them to have some grit to grind our food. So this is the Bokashi system. Some people do it on its own and they just bury the fermented food scraps into the garden. I personally like doing this for indoor systems, and it works really well. So this is my experience. I'm not a scientist, so take this information, do your own experiment, try it at home, figure it out what works for you, learn what your systems can do for you. And I hope you stay tuned to this channel, like the video if you thought there was something helpful, and subscribe if you like. Again, thank you so much for watching.